Lawyers of Reddit, what was the best gotcha moment you ever experienced? Lady got into a minor fender bender with a truck in a casino parking lot. She backed out of a spot into him. My guy said she parked and went inside the casino for a few hours. At her deposition, she testified that she was so hurt she went right home and to a hospital. I asked if she was a frequent visitor of casino and if she had a rewards card. She was happy to tell me she did, and she had gold status, and showed me the card. I subpoenaed her rewards card's records, and it showed she was playing slots for hours after the accident. Plaintiff had an x-ray of an allegedly broken arm. It seemed off to me, and the dates didn't make sense. I was in-house at an academic medical center. I looked at the case more closely, and discovered the plaintiff was a x-ray tech at another hospital. After that, it was all over. My client's house burned down from an explosion in the fuel oil tank used to heat the house. It was clearly the oil maintenance company's fault, but his homeowner's insurance, from a very reputable company, still refused to pay out, citing a ridiculous technicality in his policy. Essentially, the policy covered damage caused by the oil heater, but they claimed that it was the storage tank that exploded and wasn't part of what was covered. So they deny his claim, which was about $2 million, and then I get involved. During a deposition with the claims adjuster, I ask how she came to the conclusion that the storage tank was not a part, or at least connected to, the heater. She states that she relied on her expert witness who was an engineer. Little did she know I had already checked this person's background. He had zero engineering experience or education. As most of you might know, you don't get attorney's fees in most cases. However, when an insurance company denies your claim in bad faith, now you do. Her little admission cost the company about $500K in fees, on top of the original claim for $2 million. I was trying to get a restraining order for a woman in DV court from her son's father. We are presenting testimony, and she details a story where he grabbed her arm and slammed it on the tub, breaking her wrist. On cross, I asked the accused if he ever broke my client's wrist on purpose. His response F******, yeah, I did. She was 9 months pregnant, about to smoke crack, and wouldn't stop. I tried to grab her arm to get the pipe and protect my unborn son. F******, me. She left that detail out in her conversations with me. I had a former client file for bankruptcy, and in connection with that case, brought an action against his landlord for violating the automatic stay. In order to prove damages, he wanted to show he paid my firm for legal fees in connection with the landlord's pursuit of rent in violation of the stay. So this former client's bankruptcy lawyer serves me a subpoena to show up at the bankruptcy hearing. He didn't ask me any questions prior, but just gave me the gist of what the objective was, i.e. verify with the court the time I spent and the cost to his client. The bankruptcy attorney called his client, my former client, to the stand first. He asked him questions related to his hiring my firm to do this, and that as it related to his landlord. Apparently that's not enough. The bankruptcy attorney wants me to verify these facts as well. I get put on the stand, and I'm asked to verify the invoice. I first object to the question as a precaution, since it may be a violation of attorney-client privilege, to answer the question and to cover me for any claim by the bar or my former client. As predicted, the judge overrules and orders me to answer. I review the invoice, answer, no, this is not my invoice. His attorney, I don't understand. This is your firm's logo and information, right? Me, yes. His attorney, and you provided these legal services, right? Me, no. A very confused attorney slowly started to put together, after a couple more follow-up questions, that this idiot client of ours had manufactured my invoice to prove his damages. Needless to say, that I could have given his new attorney the heads up, but I wasn't going to help someone who had committed perjury to the court using my name. I had represented him in a completely different matter, and this guy was trying to make some extra cash through this bankruptcy hearing. To lessons, tell your attorney everything, and as an attorney, make sure your client feels comfortable to tell you everything. Cross-examining a custom home builder who had a lump sum contract, set price as opposed to cost plus, which means cost of the materials plus X% as builder fee, with the homeowner claimed he put 20% more labor/materials in building the home than the contracted provided for, and he was suing for these excess costs. Was asking him about an email with my client negotiating the price of the construction, and he volunteers that he knew he *couldn't* build it for that price. My head snaps up, supervising partner's head snaps up, and opposing counsel goes pale. Dialogue was something like, me, you quoted X price? Builder, yes me, you knew you couldn't build it for that price? Builder, yes me, you knew the homeowner was relying on that quote? Builder, yes me, you knew homeowner wouldn't have signed contract without that representation? Builder, yes me, and you told homeowner's lender you could do it for X. Builder, yes me, and bank relied on that price and wouldn't have given loan if knew it was wrong? Builder, yes this is textbook fraudulent inducement, and he had no idea. Builder got poured out in the arbitration award and slapped builder with sizable punitive damages on top of it. 5 minutes of testimony sunk his case because he volunteered information without being prompted. Not so much a gotcha as it is the defendant giving themselves up. When I worked for insurance defense, I handled a fraud case where a man reported his Rolex as being stolen. He was adamant that he was at a hotel and it was stolen. He has shown no proof of being in a hotel, so it's flagged. We go through the whole process and finally reach depositions. He gets sworn in and eventually let out that he wasn't at a hotel, but rather with his mistress, and he had left it at her house. His wife noticed he didn't have it on, so he immediately claims it must have been stolen etc etc. This man decided to hire an attorney and go through this whole circus just so his wife wouldn't find out about his affair. Needless to say, the claim was denied. Not a lawyer, but when I was in the military I was accused of something I didn't do, and I had to go to court over it. And during court the prosecutor started to detail this investigation and how they had staked my apartment out for months. They entered into evidence a picture of my apartment, and when they put it up I looked shocked at my lawyer. BC, it wasn't a picture of my place. It was my ex-wife's apartment. A place I had never lived, never even spent a single night there. I lived in a house, she lived in an apartment. And when my lawyer was asked if she objected to the picture being entered into evidence, she replied, I don't mind them entering it into evidence, as long as they change the listing of it. And when one of the members of the panel, no judge, 3-member board, asked what was wrong with the listing, she looked at him and said that's not his apartment. On top of this, the witness they used against me described going to my house on the night in question, and she named the subdivision where she had visited me, except that wasn't where I lived either. Also wasn't where the picture they had was either. Case was dismissed, and I was told they requested the witness to return to answer questions about perjury. Had a client accused of leading the cops on a high-speed chase. The cop on the stand estimated he was going 90 miles per hour, but never actually clocked him. Then the cop identified where the chase started with me and where it ended. It lasted about 2 miles. Then we went through his log of when it started and when it ended. About 3.5 minutes. Once you walk through the math on that, the average speed of this chase was 35 miles per hour. Client got acquitted really quickly after that. Perhaps not my best, but it was recent and pretty good. I represented a guy whose car died in the middle of the freeway at 4 AM. He put his hazard lights and called 911 for help. At the same time, an LAPD cop heading to work around the same time in a police unmarked car was driving around 87, 92 miles per hour deconstructionist. He doesn't see our guy, strikes him and causes a major 6-car collision, including overturning an 18-wheeler truck. Police arrive and take photos. LAPD officer claimed our guy did not have his hazard lights on, and he was only driving 60 miles per hour. He was trying to put some of the fault on our guy. At the deposition of the investigating officer, she doesn't remember if our guy's hazard lights were on or not. Attorney bring photos from the scene. One of the photos showed my guy's hazard lights on. We were dismissed shortly thereafter. The first case I ever did, opposing counsel misplaced the copy of my client's driver's license. Rather than admitting his mistake and asking me to rescind it, he filed a motion to compel, claiming we never sent it. Represented a DUI client who swore up and down to me he hadn't been drinking or doing any drugs. Newbie officer who had his field training officer with him in the car. Rookie pulls client over for attack violation. Walks back to the car with body camera still on. Training officer says get him out for a DUI and the rookie says, but has not intoxicated, to which the reply was do it anyway. Body cam clicks off, turns on 7 minutes later, and they're doing field sobriety exercises on my client. Client sat in custody for 3 weeks, until I finally got the tape from the prosecutor, and presented it to the judge. The OS **G looks from the prosecutor and FTO. When the judge saw the tape, he'll treasure that one. Judge wrote the police chief a letter saying the FTO was dead to him and had denied every search warrant he tried to bring thereafter for being a liar. Client is hopefully still on track with his civil attorney in a lawsuit. I was suing a landlord who failed to make serious repairs in order to force the tenant out. The hard part is proving bad intent instead of mere idiocy, so you get higher damages. Code enforcement was involved, so I request those records. The landlord left a voicemail to the enforcement department saying to hold off on the fines. They will make the repairs as soon as the tenant is forced out. That was an easy case. My brother is an attorney. He had a case where the guy said he was permanently disabled from a work accident. At a deposition, my brother overheard the guy talking about getting his house remodeled. He was already spending the money he thought he was getting. My brother drove by the house to see how much work was being done and saw the guy carrying bundles of roofing shingles up a ladder to the roof. This was before smartphones, so he drove to a Best Buy and bought a video camera, went back and recorded the guy. He had copies made and sent to the other attorney. The guy dropped the suit and was back at work the following Monday. My brother's client didn't want to pay for the video camera. He saved them thousands of dollars. They eventually paid, but he still gets a little peeved when he talks about it. I had client whose $60K car was ruined by a shop that put in the wrong oil. We couldn't prove it at first. The engine blew up, oil leaked out, and evidence was lost. I subpoenaed their bank records, figured out they bought their oil from Costco, called Costco and got their prices for the last 2 years. I then worked out the amounts they were spending, did some backhand math, and showed based on the values it was impossible they had ever bought the right oil. They settled in full immediately. Not a lawyer, but a legal videographer. This gentleman was claiming injury/seeking damages against his employer after a fall at work. He claimed he couldn't raise his right arm above his shoulder because of the fall. First deposition comes along, and I'm hired by defendant's attorney to videotape deposition of the plaintiff. Anyone know the first thing a court reporter asks you to do in a deposition? Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Plaintiff raises his right arm above his shoulder with ease, and no sign of discomfort does not occur to him what he has just done. Both attorneys were looking down at their notes when this happened, and neither of them caught it. The plaintiff himself didn't catch it. The court reporter looked at him and then looked at me, and her eyes went wide with realization at what just happened. 4 hours of deposition proceed wherein the plaintiff is instructed multiple times to show his range of motion and proceeds to pretend like he can't raise his arm above shoulder level, which he did at the very beginning of his deposition. Deposition ends. Plaintiff's counsel leaves. I call defense hiring party counsel over and show him the first 2 minutes of tape. Counsel excitedly whispers to me, "Case closed. You just saved us tens of thousands of dollars." I got a $5,000 bonus and plaintiff's case was dismissed with prejudice. This is so petty. I've had much bigger moments, but because of the character of the other side, this will always be my favorite. Doing a boundary dispute, a squabble over what was essentially a few inches of land. Oss was a lawyer and an absolute asshole. He was acting for himself. The whole "a lawyer who acts for himself has a fool for a client" thing was bang on for him. But he was a deeply unpleasant guy, a bully who thought that he was the smartest guy in the room. Part of his case hinged on wheelie bins and how prior to the boundary having been moved there wasn't space to store a full-size bin beside the house. The fact you now could meant clearly the boundary must have moved. That was the extent of his evidence. It really was thin stuff. During the actual trial he pulled a fast one by suddenly producing an old aerial photo ostensibly to show the boundary at the front of the property had also moved. A fast one, because you have to disclose stuff like that in advance. You can't just sit on something relevant and then suddenly whip it out at trial with a flourish. whilst he was making his submissions, that it should be admissible. I looked more closely at it, away from the bit of the boundary he said it was relevant to, and realized that it very clearly showed a wheelie bin in exactly the spot his case said there couldn't be one. Told the judge we were happy for the photo be admitted after all, got the other side to confirm the date it was taken, then pointed out he'd just completely F***KD his case. That photo did him for nearly 50k in adverse costs. Couldn't happen to a more deserving chapter. I lived with a guy when we were in our early 20s. He worked for one of those S***TTY furniture rental places where people without money get furniture. Much of his job was repossessing furniture, and in his spare time he was a skateboarder. He severely hurt his back on the job and they were contesting paying his bills and settling. At one of his mediation dates they revealed they had hired a private investigator to follow him. They showed him pictures of himself at a skate park skating when he was supposed to be home recovering. They asked him to verify it was him. He said no. These diffusers had somehow missed that he had a twin brother that also skated. They eventually settled for what I thought was a very low 70k. He had back pain for years that caused him to gain weight and suffer. In his 30s he finally had back surgery and he regretted not doing it 10 years earlier. He said it completely alleviated the pain. Not as exciting / in the moment as some other ones here, but we hired a private investigator to track our defendant in a fraud / asset recovery case. Private investigator returned with a photograph of torn pieces of paper that clearly constituted a ripped up note, albeit in a foreign language. I happened to know said foreign language, so pieced it together and realized it was a letter written by the defendant raging at his accomplice for making highly specific mistakes that F***KD him over in the context of our fraud / asset recovery case. Obviously, we later had this verified and sworn to via affidavit by an official translator. It was unbelievable. The handwriting was a match. Plus, he'd also signed it, and the contents were so specific. Contained information about specific amounts going into specific trusts under specific names, that it was basically a smoking gun. We almost thought they'd planted it to throw us off, but the guy was just stupid and arrogant. Ran into a bit of a fight admissibility, but the letter ultimately helped us receive a significant settlement that made our clients extremely happy. My client was a woman working at a meat packing plant. Her glove, they would only give her the loose kind because they were cheaper, got caught in the machine, and she lost her arm. We sued the owners of the plant for the glove issue. We also sued the machine manufacturer for failing to include the required guard. Then we sued the distributor for being in the chain of the sale, but didn't really think they played much of a role. The manufacturer swore they included a hand guard and said the plant owner must have used a grinder to take it off. During a deposition of the guy that owned the distraction company, he shows up with the sale documents he was supposed to have turned over weeks before. Turns out there was a note in small print at the bottom he didn't know about that said the sale was without the hand guard, which is against the law. I pointed it out, and we ended up settling that afternoon with the distributor. The woman got all her medical bills paid, got money for a prosthetic, and got a bunch of pain and suffering damages. In a protective order hearing, a respondent admitted on cross that he choked his partner. His attorney looked like his head was going to explode. The judge still only granted an order not to abuse. He wouldn't grant the stay away or any other relief we asked for. Go figure. I was deposing a guy in a large breach of contract / fraud action. I asked him if he'd ever been convicted of a crime. He said no. Later in the dep I asked him the question again and there was no objection and he answered no. I then whipped out his indictment for felony fraud and his conviction for misdemeanor conspiracy and he denied it was him until I started asking about his co-conspirator, his son, and then he gave me the "oh yeah, I remember something about that." I was representing mom in a bitter custody fight. Dad wanted full custody and argued mom was an unfit parent. Mom wanted full custody because dad had a history of domestic violence towards her and the kids. Dad's lawyer was doing a good job of painting her in a bad light during his cross-examination, and I was starting to get worried. His lawyer brought a close family friend as a character witness for dad, who said the usual nice things about dad. Then he said something about the moaning chickens. I thought that was odd, so I asked more questions. I was able to get the friend to spill the beans that the dad owned chickens for illegal cockfighting, and he'd take his minor children to these cockfights, and when the children were acting up, he'd punish them by forcing them to feed the chickens, during which they would get pecked and scratched by the chickens. And obviously, the children were terrified of those chickens. I could see the color draining from dad's lawyer's face. Mom got full custody. I acted for a plumber who ripped up a tile floor to replace a pipe. He installed new tile on top, but warned the owners not to walk on it for 48 hours. He emphasized not to let their kids or their dogs walk on it either. They walked on it, but alleged the defects were caused by improper install. We had an expert do a report which confirmed that it was consistent with proper installation, but people walking on it too soon. Crazy home owners still went to trial on it. In their evidence disclosure they included a series of pictures. One of the pictures had in the foreground a tile that was tilted upwards. The background very clearly showed a dog's paw pressing down on the other end of the tile. That wasn't so much an I got them situation as they got themselves. TL. Doctor, ex-wife gave away custody of my daughter while angrily arguing with the judge. Not a lawyer. Was taking my ex to court over custody of my kid. I had compiled a 150-page dossier complete with a report from Child Protective Services, since there was abuse in the household. Text messages and tons of records of contempt of our previous agreement. My daughter has a court-assigned lawyer. That is normal in these cases, which after reading through all the materials and talking to all the parties sided with my lawyer, and I the ex decided to represent themselves because hubris, I suppose. Before the case was heard in the hallway outside of the courtroom, she gave me an agreement she typed up which would grant me custody as well as some generous provisions for herself. I politely declined as we were confident we would be getting a lot more in trail. Case was called. Testimonies in. She put on the most hilariously insane and embarrassing show for the court. In her closing testimony she attempted to hand the judge the agreement she tried to give us. Judge refused to take it. You can't just hand me things. That's not how you submit things into evidence. I'm not reading that. She's arguing with the judge, yelling at him, and losing her ***T. In the insane nonsense she was spewing she said, and this agreement gives him custody, which is one of the things he's after, in what I assume was an attempt to show that she's attempting a compromise. My lawyer peppers in a quick statement, okay, so you agree for the father to have full custody? She snaps in heated anger, yes. That's what I agreed to. Our side falls completely silent and the judge, after much effort, ends her little outburst. Gave his final verdict, which started with granting me custody and putting her in court-mandated therapy. She literally gave away custody of her daughter in a heated argument with the judge. Make sure to like and subscribe for more daily content. Thanks for watching.